This has to be the worst outfit I've ever gotten in my entire life. Look at this. What is it doing to my shoulders? And the glare on the glasses too, sir. Anyway, I do like the magnifying glasses. It's pretty good. However, we're not here for the fit. Although, maybe you are. We are here today to start, for the very first time ever, Sherlock Holmes. Yes, that's right. I have never read Sherlock Holmes before by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Never read it. I do know of Sherlock Holmes. He's one of the literary greats. We have heard about him. We've seen him. I have actually seen a couple of those films with Robert Downey Jr. as Sherlock. And I've seen like one episode of that Sherlock TV show with Benedict Cumberbatch. And also, I did watch season 1 of Elementary with Lucy Liu. And that was because I was a Lucy Liu fan, not because I was actually paying attention to what was going on. So this is my very first foray into reading Sherlock Holmes. Now, I will not be reading this massive tome because the writing is freaking tiny, for one. In two, I am only going to be reading, and you're probably going to hate me, for any of the Sherlock Holmes stands out there, you might hate me for this, but I'm only going to be reading the 4 novels that were released. And there are many short stories. I think it's like, 56? In 4 novels. And I'm only going to be sticking to the novels today and tomorrow and the day after that. However long it takes me to read these books. These are going to be a lot more easier for me to read as well than my complete collection. And if this video does well, I may follow this one up with doing all of these short stories. So like the video if you enjoy, subscribe if you haven't already. And yeah, I will be reading A Study in Scarlet in this video, as well as The Sign of 4, The Hound of the Baskervilles, and we also have The Valley of Fear. And all ad revenue on this video will be going towards a special cause indeed. A special cause that is very near and dear to my heart. And that is me putting money towards the Lego Sherlock Holmes book nook. I really want that. I want it so bad. And you're probably wondering, why now? Why are you only reading Sherlock Holmes for the first time now? And that's because on May 22nd, there is an official Sherlock Holmes Day. And I would love to celebrate it this year by uploading this vlog on Sherlock Holmes Day. It's been a dream of mine. It's been a dream of mine since last year. And I was supposed to do this last year, but I completely forgot. This year, though, it's definitely going to happen. So having said that, I hope you join me for the journey. This will be spoiler-filled. This vlog will be filled with spoilers. So if you have not yet read any Sherlock Holmes, then maybe do that first and then come back. Or if you don't really care about spoilers for Sherlock Holmes, then feel free to continue on. Let me tell you everything about it. Let me tell you all my thoughts, my feelings, my opinions, and let's say if we can have a frolicking good time with it. And this tash is really hanging on to my lip. My lip is very, very strong. I have a lip stronger than Sherlock Holmes's powers of deduction. It ain't coming off. But this tash just represents everything this vlog is going to stand for. Resilience, determination, and a whole lot of style. So I have read the first 3 chapters of A Study in Scarlet, and I fear that I'm falling in love. Honestly, it's so good, and it's so easy to follow as well. Sometimes, you know, classics do sometimes stump me. It depends on how they're written. But this is so accessible, so good. It comes from like Watson's point of view. So it's like first person from Watson. At least this first part is anyway. So part 1 is being a reprint from the reminiscences of John H. Watson, MD, late of the Army Medical Department. So that's part 1. I don't know if that continues the entire way through like all of the novels, but I love the fact that we just get straight into it. We do. We don't fanny on. We don't pussyfoot around. We get straight into meeting Mr. Sherlock Holmes and getting to learn a little bit more about Watson as well. And I will say, I was recommended listening to the audiobook as well, narrated by Stephen Fry. So I'm reading along physically as I'm listening to the audiobook by Stephen Fry. And it's such a great audiobook. Like, Stephen Fry's voice is fantastic. So one of the things I love the fact that we are introduced to Watson first, and we are seeing Sherlock essentially through his eyes, and he is learning so much about him, but also we are learning about Watson. And with Watson, he has come back from Afghanistan. He was injured there. He was struck on the shoulder by a Jezeel bullet, shot at the bone and grazed the subclavian artery. So Watson has been through some stuff. This is trauma for him. And I love the fact that this is one of the first things that we learn about Watson, because when we first meet Sherlock Holmes, literally only a couple of pages later, one of the first things that Sherlock says is, "How are you? You have been in Afghanistan, I perceive." So that's so funny because Watson is like, I haven't told you this. And Watson even thinks that their sort of acquaintance, their joint friend who is introducing them to each other, Stamford, he assumes that Stamford told Sherlock Holmes. But that is not the case. Sherlock Holmes is just brilliant at observing people, at deductions. And that's something that Watson needs to like slowly learn. And I love the fact that they've already like clashed heads. But before that as well, so what kicks off the story is it's so funny and interesting, like how quickly this happens, but like it's great because it means that, yeah, we don't have a lot of fluff in the beginning. We really do get straight into it. So Watson is looking for lodgings, and then he has run into Stamford, and Stamford's like, this is so funny because I literally just spoke to someone this morning who is also looking for someone to share lodgings with. And it's perfect. It's amazing. And could you imagine if Watson never said anything and then he never met Sherlock? I just love, and I always think about instances where just like one change of behavior, one change of a decision could totally dictate the rest of your life. And yeah, the fact that he asked or even like said anything about his lodgings, and then, yeah, oh, I know someone who has also been asking for the same thing. So they meet, and I love the meeting as well because, you know, we have this air of mystery around Sherlock because Stamford describes him in a way as like, oh, he's so exact, like he's very scientific, a little too scientific for a lot of people's tastes. And it doesn't sound too bad on paper. He appears to have a passion for definite and exact knowledge. And even Watson is like, very right too. But like, yes, but it can be pushed to excess. He'll beat the subjects to verify how far bruises may be reduced after death. And, you know, there's just like some little sprinklings of, okay, like it sounds good on paper that Sherlock Holmes is so thorough and so investigative, but like there is a limit. And it seems like Sherlock Holmes has no qualms in, you know, crossing that line. But I just freaking love the fact that the first interaction between Sherlock and Watson is Sherlock observing something that was unspoken, and he is spot on. And then we have the mention of Baker Street. And like that feels nostalgic to me, even though I've never really connected with Sherlock Holmes in the past and like the mediums that I have watched of it. I have seen, I mentioned the introduction, but I've seen a couple of things, and Sherlock Holmes is so prominent in our consciousness when it comes to literary figures. And I feel like that influence is just like everywhere. So just the sound of Baker Street, like the idea of Baker Street is nostalgic to me, even though again, like I've never read these books before. In Sherlock as well, when he's trying to persuade Watson, I guess not exactly persuade, but to be honest with Watson about what he will be signing up for if he shared lodgings with him. And he's like, generally have chemicals about, would that annoy you? And then he's like, let me see one of my other shortcomings. I get in the dumps at times and don't open my mouth for days on end. You must not think I'm sulky when I do that. And he's just like telling Watson like a little list of, hey, like this is my behavior, this is my personality, don't be turned off, this is just who I am. And I love that. This was written when? In the 1880s? And I'm like, people today, like if I could explain to people sometimes that I can also be like this sometimes, like sometimes I can get overstimulated and I need to be quiet. I just need to be in my own thoughts, and I just need to get through it. And don't think I'm being sulky, don't think that I'm being rude or anything. It's just who I am. And I do think there's like maybe some diagnosis that we can give Sherlock Holmes, but I kind of don't want to diagnose anyone. I don't even want to diagnose myself half the time. But I just freaking see so much relatability already with Sherlock, and I love him. I love it. I'm 3 chapters in. I am 34 pages in, and I love him. And it's so funny as well because in the very second chapter, Watson is reading like this newspaper article, and Watson is like, what an effable twaddle. I never read such rubbish in my life. And then Sherlock's like, as for the article, I wrote it myself. Like, could you imagine butting heads so quickly with someone? And at the same time, though, it doesn't feel like a confrontation. It doesn't feel like a falling out or anything like that. It's just like 2 very different people. And they're like, oh, it's just great. Like, I absolutely love the way that they are bouncing off one another so far. It hasn't happened too much, but they're finding their feet with one another, and it's been really interesting. I chuckled so much when Watson was slagging off that newspaper article, and it turned out to be written by Sherlock. And it was all about deduction as well, like the science of deduction and analysis. And even though Watson is like, that's a bunch of bullshit, that is bullshit if I ever saw it, in Sherlock, he proves again that it works. The fact that he knew about Afghanistan, he explains his face was dark, not the natural tint of his skin, for his wrists are fair. He's undergone hardship and sickness, as his haggard face says clearly. And imagine being called haggard. Imagine if, I mean, you can write comments down below. What do you think I look like? Do you think I look haggard? And you know what? If you said yes, you'd be correct. I wouldn't take offense. But it's just the fact that Sherlock has no qualms at all, just stating the facts, just stating the obvious. You're haggard. Bitch, you need extra sleep. That's essentially what he's saying. Where in the tropics could an English army doctor have seen much hardship and got his arm wounded? Clearly in Afghanistan. So he explains that. And I like the fact that he explained it. I hope he doesn't have to explain every single time he deduces something. I think there is, I mean, I can imagine it probably is, because Sherlock is so thorough. And he probably does like explain everything. But I kind of don't mind if there are some observations he makes that are just like so out there that my brain itself could not wrap itself around. And he again like proves it as well by observing someone in the street, saying he's a retired sergeant. Turns out he's correct. He's also delivering a letter about a body that's been found. So now I'm getting into the mystery of it. I'm getting into the actual plot of what I think A Study in Scarlet is supposed to be. Oh, and going back to what I just said about, I hope Sherlock doesn't explain everything. There is like a little bit here where Sherlock says, if you were asked to prove that 2 and 2 made 4, you might find some difficulty, and yet you are quite sure of the fact. So I hope that's kind of an indication that not everything is going to be explained. Some of it will be left to our own imagination, and I'm happy with that. I am. So yeah, we have the Lauriston Gardens mystery. Sherlock's received a letter about the discovery of a body of a gentleman, well-dressed, having cards in his pocket bearing the name of Enoch J. Drebber. No robbery, nor is there evidence of how the man met his death. There are marks of blood in the room, but there is no wound upon this person. And this is so intriguing to me. I'm like, okay, chapter 3, boom. First kind of mystery that we're solving. Because I do a lot of Agatha Christie solving reading blogs, and I don't think I could do a similar thing with Sherlock Holmes, because I feel like every single clue is going to be Sherlock telling you what he has observed, and it's going to be hard that way to... I don't think this is like a whodunit. You know, like the Agatha Christie mysteries are like whodunits that you could probably try and solve yourself. Whereas with Sherlock Holmes, I feel like it's written totally different. But then again, I could be wrong. I'll probably find out. And then if I could try and solve one, maybe that could be fun to do in the future. But yeah, I love the description of the place when they get there. So like what's in accompany Sherlock. And Sherlock explains that he is a consulting detective. And so like he makes observations that other people would otherwise miss. And he like helps with the cases, like points them in the right direction. And I just freaking love the description that a lot of classic books do that a lot of modern books lack. What draws me to classics a lot of times is the lush descriptive writing. And when Watson is describing the room, it just sounds so great the way he's describing it. And then yeah, we have the body of the man. And it's funny because there are a couple of detectives there, and we have Sherlock, well, one sniffing the dead man's lips. So he's going where no full-fledged detective has gone before, and he is literally getting his hands a little bit dirty to just get some clues. And literally 2 pages later, he's already proving the detectives that he is the one for the case, essentially. The detectives are making deductions that are completely wrong. And I love when Sherlock proves them wrong. Like there is the word R-A-C-H-A written on the wall in blood. And they assume, oh, maybe they were writing Rachel and they died before they could, you know, finish the word, the name. And Sherlock is like, oh, no. The German word for revenge. So don't lose your time by looking for Miss Rachel. Boom. Mic drop. I can imagine there's going to be so many mic drop moments with Sherlock Holmes proving them wrong. And even just the other things about it, like Sherlock is saying in all probability the murderer had a florid face, and the fingernails of his right hand were remarkably long. Few indications, but they may assist you. They will definitely assist them because they're sniffing up the wrong tree. Is that the right? No, they're barking up the wrong tree. So his deductions are so valuable, and it is just way too easy. Like when the detectives are talking about what happened and what they think had happened, it is just too easy. When one of them is talking, he's saying, meanwhile, it means that the writer was going to put their female name Rachel, but disturbed before he or she had time to finish. You mark my words, when this case comes to be cleared up, you will find that a woman named Rachel has something to do with it. It's all very well for you to laugh, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. You may be very smart and clever, but the old hound is the best when all is said and done. I love the fact that we already have some, you know, opposition with Sherlock and his detective ways, but he's handing their ass to them. and I love seeing that. I do. Those are my first impressions, my initial impressions of the story. Still very early days, but I already love him. I love Sherlock. I think he's fantastic. What? I didn't realise that by the end of part 1 we would have caught the murderer. What the hell is part 2 about then? I was not expecting the fact that this case seems to have been solved by page 70. And this is, yeah, definitely why I can't really go in and try and solve a Sherlock Holmes mystery, because the person who it turned out to be, Jefferson, hadn't really been mentioned up until that point. So it's not like you can get a list of suspects and try and deduce it that way. Oh no, like literally Sherlock Holmes is the only one who can solve these mysteries. That is what is apparent so far in the first 70 pages of this novel. What? Like, was this like 2 shorter stories put into... I will reserve questions until after I finish like the full thing. But this has surprised me. I wasn't expecting that. I also wasn't expecting the fact that, because when they find that ring, you know, the one that's connected to the murder, and Sherlock Holmes has put in an advertisement in the newspaper, and I freaking love the fact that an old woman came to answer the advertisement, but it turns out that it was most likely a young man dressed as an old woman, just like acting it. So like, how would that have come across as? It sounds a little bit ridiculous, but also like really fun at the same time. Like, was it actually a man pretending to be an old woman? And they didn't realize that at the time? It was so funny. And yeah, I did love the fact that Sherlock would then follow this person, and the old woman seems to have like completely disappeared outside. Just so good. It was so riveting, actually. Like, that part was like so good. Also, Sherlock describing how he made those deductions to Watson when Watson's just asking so many questions about what he had seen at the crime scene, and the fact that Sherlock spotted things even before getting into the crime scene, like the actual, you know, marks on the road that a cab had made, and like that all connects with who actually did it by the end of this part. And yeah, just like his brain doesn't seem to stop, and it doesn't just start when he walks into the crime scene. It's always going. It's always going, and all of that's so important. And the wrong person could have been behind bars had the actual detectives on the case stuck with their actual theory of it being a gentleman who, well, there was someone called Alice who the victim had like kind of proposed to, was being a bit of a ruckus with, and the brother of Alice, he chases him off and is supposedly the last person to see him alive. And so we have like a suspect, absolutely, but again, that was just way too easy. And Gregson, who is the detective, just absolutely misses the mark on that. And I love the fact that it kind of sounds a little bit like Sherlock has been a little bit sarcastic when he says, Gregson, you're getting along, we shall make something of you yet. That is definitely sarcasm, because even I think Sherlock Holmes is sitting there, because when he says, oh yeah, this is exciting, he yawns. Sherlock Holmes yawns as Gregson is explaining how they ended up arresting Alice's brother. So all of that was like hilarious to watch Sherlock. And I was reading it being like, this guy, this Gregson, so wrong. So wrong. But then the secretary of the victim turns up dead. And that instantly means, oh, that theory is wrong then. It wasn't Alice's brother. Lieutenant Charpentier, that was the first person who got arrested, who Gregson thought had done it. But no. The secretary was murdered. And oh, this was a little bit heartbreaking. I wasn't expecting an animal death, in the fact that Sherlock would be the one to do it. This landlady has this terrier, devil of a terrier, been bad so long. Landlady wanted you to put out of its pain yesterday. And when you see this dog already exceeded the usual term of canine existence, and there was a couple of pills at the crime scene of the secretary, and Holmes is like testing them, and they give this poor dog the pill. I mean, I guess it was probably for the best for this dog, considering it does look like the landlady wanted it put out of its pain, and that's obviously like a more humane thing to do, absolutely. But again, I wasn't expecting Sherlock Holmes to kill a fucking dog in his first story, his first outing. And I know it's like, he didn't do it maliciously, and he didn't do it as just an experiment either. Even though it was an experiment, he wouldn't have done it to a healthy dog. I feel that in my bones. I feel that, you know, I want to give... I was going to say the benefit of the doubt, but I don't have any issue with him, you know, allowing a suffering animal to be put out of its misery. Absolutely. It's just, I didn't expect it. I'm so shocked. I didn't expect this to be part of the story. The poor doggy, oh, rest in peace. But definitely out of its pain now, which is a good thing. Charpentier could not have been involved in the murder of the secretary. But then we have like this really exciting scene, like literally in the last couple of pages I read, page 69, page 70, where the cabman who is like rocked up to Baker Street. I don't know how I feel about the use of the Arabs in this story so far as well. It feels a little bit dated, but they have been helping Sherlock and they've managed to get a cab and they have a cab downstairs. And it turns out that that cabman is the killer, Mr. Jefferson Hope, the murderer of Enoch Drebber and of Joseph Stangerson. And everyone's just like, wait, what? What? And even I was like, what? The cabman? The man who's just rolled up? This is the first time I've heard of them. And yeah, it turns out that he's absolutely correct. He tries to get away, but they manage to get him. We have reached the end of our little mystery. You are very welcome to put any questions that you like to me now, and there is no danger that I will refuse to answer them. So I have so many questions. Like, what? So yeah, I really enjoyed part one. Maybe part two will explain who this Jefferson Hope person is in more depth. Potentially, because at the minute I'm just like, I'm a little bit lost. But then again, that's kind of what I expected with a Sherlock Holmes story. I wasn't expecting to get the answers to everything. It's not what I want either. I'm just here for the ride. I really am. I'm here for the ride. And yeah, I just flabbergasted. Okay, so I finished part two, and I was so confused to begin with because I was like, what is going on here? Why have we moved continents? Why have we moved countries? Why have we moved time period? And yeah, like that was an interesting choice. I mean, I understand it now. I do. I understand it now. Everything is explained why Jefferson Hope did what he did. And it was really interesting, don't get me wrong. But yeah, we had like 5 full chapters without Mr. Sherlock. And Sherlock didn't really say a whole great deal until pretty much the end of this part. So like I didn't really feel like it was wholly it didn't feel like wholly Sherlock Holmes, if that makes sense. And for that reason, I didn't like love the second part as much as I did the first part. The first part had me gripped. It had me gripped. And I was actually rooting for Jefferson Hope. I was. The story about Lucy and how he fell in love with her. I feel like I don't need to repeat the entire plot to anyone who's like read Sherlock Holmes, but I do feel like I need to give at least a brief kind of summary as well of what I've just read so that I can understand where I'm coming from with some of my opinions. So I don't really want to like rehash all of this happened, this happened, this happened. But we did have John Ferrier and there was a little girl called Lucy. And this is in Utah. And like this is years and years and years ago. They're saved by Mormons and they have to live under like this Mormon faith. And when Lucy's a bit older, she has to sort of give herself up to the Mormons and marry someone within that. But she has fallen in love with Jefferson Hope. And she is not really supposed to marry him. And Jefferson Hope goes away. And one part that I do like about this section is when John is being kind of threatened. The Mormons are leaving the numbers counting down because they give him 30 days to like pretty much hand over Lucy. And like, there's a countdown happening. In one night as well, he wakes up in the morning, but during the night, someone must have put a note on his chest. And he didn't even realize that. That's terrifying. That is so scary. And I was wondering, okay, Jefferson Hope, come on, like come back and save them. And he does end up coming back. He ends up having to like slink like on the floor to them, which was kind of funny, but obviously so sad as well. They do escape. However, the father ends up getting killed by the secretary of the victim who we started the story with. So Stangerson, he is the one who kills like the dad. And Drebber is the one who forces Lucy to marry him. And obviously like now that I kind of know some context, I'm rooting for Jefferson Hope and I didn't think that would happen. I kind of love the fact that part 2 did recontextualize the actual murder and what Sherlock was investigating. Because now I'm like, okay, let the poor man go. Let the poor man go. Like he was out for vengeance in a very justifiable way, you know, like he was acting like a vigilante, but I was actually rooting for Jefferson Hope. I was, sue me. And honestly, find me a guy like Jefferson Hope who is willing to travel hundreds of miles and go across the world just to hunt down 2 people who destroyed your life. So if I was Lucy, I'd be like, okay, this guy was the man of my dreams. Poor Lucy, though, did end up dying a month after marrying Drebber from a broken heart. And that's just so sad. Like, it's genuinely so sad. And Hope was definitely, well, her final hope. And unfortunately, he was just a little bit too late. And that's so sad. That is genuinely so sad. But now the whole pills thing was making a whole lot of sense as well. I love that Jefferson Hope confronted Drebber and was like, I'm going to have one, you're going to have one. I don't know which one is which. And we're going to let fate decide which one of us dies between us. I love that. I genuinely think that was such a fantastic way of murdering that man. Because, yeah, it could have ended up being him dying instead, but he left it up to chance, and chance was on his side. So I loved how that unfolded. And the secretary got what was coming to him as well. I'm just going to say, he got what was coming to him. And I did love how Hope was telling his story to Sherlock, to Watson, to the detectives. And he was like, I probably won't make it to the sentencing because I have like this aneurysm thing. And like Watson confirms it. And that was really, that it was just wonderfully told, like by that point as well. I was riveted by his story. I was rooting for him by that point as well. I think that was great. And yeah, Hope ended up dying anyway, but by that point, I think that he served his life's purpose and he was fine with that. He made peace with that. So at least he will be with Lucy now, which is so sad. Like actually, I'm genuinely gutted for how that unfolded. It's kind of tragic, really, really tragic. But yeah, there was like 5 full chapters that was, you know, in the past, and we were getting all of that context and stuff. And I wasn't like loving that per se, but I did end up liking the direction of it and how it tied into part 1. But it just wasn't really my favorite. But I probably would still give this like 3-star. I mean, I was feeling this could have been a 4 or a high 4-star when I started part 1, and like all of part 1 was like fantastic. But yeah, I totally understand why Doyle wrote this the way that he did, to give us the context and to end up making us root for the murderer, the murderer at the start, who we were kind of trying to find and get justice from. And justice is totally different to how I expected it to start in this story. So yeah, it was really good. But yeah, I think I prefer part 1 over part 2. I don't know if this is what all of the Sherlock Holmes stories are going to be like. I don't know if all of them are split into parts. And we have like part 1 being Sherlock deducing and investigating with Watson. And then part 2 being like, oh, this is why the murderer did it. This is how the murderer did it kind of thing. I don't know if that's the structure of a Sherlock Holmes novel, but we will definitely find out very soon because I'm about to start the next one. But yeah, overall, good reading experience. I do think I'm actually going to enjoy all of the Sherlock Holmes stories because I just like him as a character. He's so fascinating as a character, and I hope I see more of that in the next books. You're meaning to tell me that Sherlock Holmes is addicted to cocaine? I mean, firstly, when this book started, and we see him take it, but like with a syringe. There's a hypodermic syringe, and he's like using it, and that is like the first paragraph of this book. I had to look away because anything to do with like needles and stuff, it makes me cringe. It makes me feel so sick. And it's like described as well, the sinewy forearm and wrist all dotted and scarred with innumerable puncture marks. This book opened up with horror. And at first I thought that Sherlock Holmes was being sarcastic when Watson asks, which is it today, morphine or cocaine? And Sherlock says, it is cocaine, a 7% solution. Would you care to try it? I genuinely thought he was joking. But no, he's not joking. He's taking cocaine. Okay. So yeah, I learned something new about Sherlock Holmes every day. And a lot of these things I'm learning about him are through the eyes of Watson. So I do have to kind of, you know, take some things with a grain of salt because this is his observations. Like, we might disagree on things, but so far, I'm agreeing on everything. And it seems like Sherlock is a little bit vain and he does have a little bit of a vanity streak, which honestly, fair enough. You know, he's pretty brilliant in his field as a consulting detective. He is pretty brilliant. And I do always love it. And especially in this one as well, when he is overlooked by the proper authorities, like by the detectives. They really don't see him the way that he should be seen. They're always kind of like trying to bring him down. And I feel like that is definitely to do with like ego. You know, a lot of detectives don't want to be proven wrong. And yet, Sherlock Holmes keeps proving everyone wrong. So I have finished The Sign of 4. And I didn't really like this one. I'm not going to lie. I'm probably going to give like 2 stars. It wasn't great. In my opinion, I don't think it was great. I don't think it was like that captivating of a mystery. some things do not sit that right with me with, you know, some observations that obviously are dated. This is a classic. It was written in the late 1800s. And so, yeah, I can totally see that some things would not have aged well. But literally, it's just, there's only so much I can take. And this one was quite apparent with it. And I also noticed some like repetition from A Study in Scarlet as well. And maybe it's like a very purposeful thing because we're seeing some hallmarks of what makes a Sherlock Holmes story. So we have like an advertisement that's put into a newspaper to sort of work the case. So that happened in A Study in Scarlet. It's happened in this. And we also had this random moment in this book as well when Sherlock Holmes dresses up as an old person and pretends to be an old person to fool, you know, Watson. And that happened in the first book as well when that person dressed up as the old woman and then got the ring. That happened then as well. There was also a moment as well when a note is put onto someone's chest. And yeah, this exact same thing happened in this too. So yeah, I'm saying like a lot of similarities, but those are like some of my negatives. I might try and go more in depth in some of my negatives when it comes to like how like any kind of foreign person is perceived. So some things I enjoyed. I enjoyed that Watson is still trying to test Sherlock Holmes with his skills of observation because he still cannot believe it. Watson asks Holmes to check out this watch and to use his powers of observation to describe to him the previous owner of it. And it's so funny because Sherlock does exactly that. And then Watson is like, this is unworthy of you, Holmes. I could not have believed that you would have descended to this. You have made inquiries on the history of my unhappy brother, and you can now pretend to deduce this knowledge in some fanciful way. Like, he proper bites Sherlock Holmes' head off because he thinks Sherlock cheated. And he thinks that Sherlock Holmes has, like, asked around to get actual information about this watch. And it's just like, obviously that's not the case. It's like Watson has asked him to use his powers in front of him, and he does, and he can't swallow it. So that is something that I find so funny in this one. The main case of this, like, it was a little bit harder to follow than the first one. We have Miss Mary Morstan. She comes to Baker Street and she does ask for help. So her father had disappeared about 10 years before, and then 6 years before, a single pearl would get sent to her. And recently she just got a pearl with a letter with a meeting place, and she can take 2 friends. So like, she is asking if she can take Sherlock and Watson. And what's so funny about this is the very quick love story between Mary and Watson. The fact that they end up falling in love and they are then to be engaged by the end of this very short story, which doesn't happen over a great span of days. I mean, I think it is like maybe like a week max. And by the end of it, they are declaring their love for one another and they're getting married. Has anyone seen Frozen? When Anna comes up to Elsa and she's like, hey, this guy I've just met, I'm going to marry him. And Elsa's like, you can't marry a man you just met. This is essentially what happens at the end here. When Watson says, oh, I'm getting married to Mary, and Sherlock is like, well, I don't approve of that. And I'm just like, Sherlock is so funny when he's just like so honest, like so brutally honest. But yeah, you can't marry a man you just met. So that was just so bizarre though, the way that happened. Like, I understand Watson, you know, he found Mary attractive. I don't know how they did it in the Victorian time and like how quick that love story unfolded. I guess they didn't really need to go on a date or anything like that. They didn't really need to get to know one another first. Marriage. Literal marriage, and it's just insane to me. I can't wrap my head around that. All they've done together is like they've been on this case together. There was like one sweet moment, which honestly, if they wouldn't get married by the end of this book, and they're not married yet, they're kind of betrothed to one another by the end of this, but like there was a sweet moment when they both hold hands during a pretty intense scene, and it was sweet. Like, that was very, very sweet. Like, their hands had kind of naturally found each other. Very sweet. But then to end this book with, yes, I love you, I'm going to confess my love to you, and we're going to get married. It's just, wow. Wow. But again, it was a different time, and the heterosexuals, they will always confuse and bamboozle me. So who am I to judge? I did like when Watson was like, oh, that's a very attractive woman. And Sherlock was like, is she? I did not observe. Because things like that don't really factor into Sherlock's mind. And if it's not a fact, because, you know, looks can be deceiving, can't they? And he even says that as well. The most winning woman I ever knew was hanged for poisoning 3 little children. And the most repellent man in my acquaintance is a philanthropist who has spent nearly $250,000 upon the London poor. And so, like, yeah, you can't judge someone based on their looks. You have to take into account their actions, like the facts of the case, like what they actually do. And I really do like the fact that we are constantly getting such a vast contrast between Sherlock and Watson. It's so good to see them constantly kind of butt heads, but also work very well together. Watson saying, in this case, however, and Sherlock saying, I never make exceptions. I like that Sherlock does not make exceptions. An exception disproves the rule. I mean, I might not ever fully understand Sherlock's mind, but it's a very intriguing mind to have to get into every now and then. It's very interesting. So yeah, Sherlock deduces things about, Captain Morstan and being in connection to someone called Major Sholto, in the fact that the pills started to come in after Major Sholto had died. And then we also get the idea of the sign of the four: Jonathan Small, Mohammed Singh, Abdullah Khan, and Dost Akbar. So the mystery is involving like the sign of the four, like what happened, this treasure that has been, taken, and these people are fighting over it essentially. And a part of that treasure has been sent to Mary because it seems like she is the worthy recipient of this stolen stuff. Like, this is Victorian London, this is Victorian Britain. The British were very infamous for taking things that weren't theirs, for going to different countries and enslaving people. They colonized so many places, they stole so many lands, and they stole so many artifacts and treasures and family heirlooms and things. And it's like a very bloody, gnarly, disgusting history that the British have. And this is essentially a book that explores when some of that treasure gets taken and, who it belongs to, like who it rightfully belongs to is like fucking no one in this story, essentially. But yeah, people are fighting over it and they want it so badly. So they end up coming across Thaddeus, and he is the son of Major John Sholto, who worked with Mary's father. And he also has a twin brother called Bartholomew. And Bartholomew and Thaddeus were told about, the past, the treasure, that they were hiding it, but also what happened to Mary's father. Mary's father had come to Major Sholto demanding his half of the treasure that he thought he was belonging to him, and he ended up having a heart attack during the conversation, hit his head and died. That's essentially how he died. And then Major John Sholto buried the body thinking that no one would believe him, that he just had a heart attack and died. So yeah, that's what happened to Mary's father. It's kind of like an anticlimactic kind of moment, and it's not really something that we have to pursue too much of, but they do continue to look into it. It takes them to Pondicherry Lodge, which is where Bartholomew, Thaddeus's twin brother, is. This is when Watson and Mary hold hands. Miss Morstan and I stood together, and her hand was in mine. A wondrous subtle thing is love, for here were we two, who had never seen each other before that day, between whom no word or even look of affection had ever passed, and yet now in an hour of trouble, our hands instinctively sought for each other. They hadn't known each other before that day, only known each other for like hours. And yet we have the mention of love. It's so crazy. They end up finding the body of Bartholomew. He has been killed with a poison dart kind of thing. I love the rigor mortis that is set in and the way that his face is. Apparently he had like a really sadistic kind of look to him. Like the body had a sadistic look, a sadistic grin, and it was like really gnarly and ghastly. And the sign of the four were apparently involved. So like there are like elements of a good mystery there with the sign of the four. But yeah, the way that it ends up wrapping up and the way it feels a little bit icky to me. It didn't really sit as a good mystery to me by the end. There was a hole in the roof and that's how they escaped kind of thing. There's just a lot of things I really wasn't that interested, unfortunately. Like there's lots of things that I've underlined and, I can talk about the case, but I'm just like, it didn't really interest me though. Okay, so the recurring thing that I do like about this is when officers, like detectives, undermine Sherlock, when he's try to. And it's when Mr. Athelney Jones comes into it. And he's like, it's Mr. Sherlock Holmes, the theorist. It's true you set us on the right track, but you'll own now that it was more by good luck than good guidance. No, it was good guidance. Sherlock has been putting them in the right direction. And this Mr. Jones wants to arrest the wrong people. He wants to arrest Thaddeus and, some of the servants. And that's just like completely the wrong person. Jones is telling his theory of what happened, and then Sherlock replies, on which the dead man very considerably got up and locked the door on the inside. And then Mr. Jones is like, there's a flaw there. Yeah, you're telling me. Because, like, what you're saying is not making any sense. So I do always like it when there's a back and forth between actual law enforcement and Sherlock Holmes. And that's when Sherlock Holmes drops the name Jonathan Small. And he talks about who actually killed him. Jonathan Small is one of the people who was part of the sign of the four. There is a massive chapter, like chapter 12 is the last chapter. It's really big. And it goes through Jonathan Small talking about, like, all the events that led up to it, which again like feels like the first book, but in the first book we had 5 chapters of context and like the flashback and all of that, whereas in this it's the long chapter at the end with like how they came across the treasure and the sign of the four and what that entailed. And honestly, it was boring. Like, I genuinely was so bored by it, and I just didn't like the way that foreign people were described or mentioned. The motive in this is exactly the same as the study in Scarlet as well, with revenge. And although the difference in this is that I didn't really sympathize or care for the like any of the story. So like within the first book, I did feel quite sorry for the person who was like exacting revenge. But in this one, I felt absolutely nothing, and I wasn't rooting for anyone. But yeah, the motive is exactly the same. It is revenge. Hopefully this is not like the only kind of motive for the rest of the Sherlock Holmes books. I liked when the dog, Toby, was trying to find the perpetrators. It led to Sherlock Holmes and Watson blankly looking at each other and bursting out with simultaneous laughter. I like it when there's like a little bit of injection of personality with the characters. And at that moment when the dog is trying to find the clue by following its nose, it's just so funny the way that they just kind of reacted to that because it didn't go how they thought it would. So I like that. So Mr. Jones has a wooden leg. Like, I don't even want to repeat the words that these people use. And yeah, I don't ever like the way that the Baker Street irregulars are mentioned as well, because the way that Watson describes them always is so like vile, the way that he describes them, and it's so like nasty. And yet these Baker Street irregulars are doing a lot of work for Sherlock Holmes, and Sherlock is always telling them to like do something for him, to find something for him. And in this case, they're trying to find a steam launch called the Aurora, because they believe that Jones is trying to get, free from them with the Aurora. And yeah, I'm hoping that the next two mysteries I'm about to read kind of scale back on this. I mean, it would be amazing if there was like no like racism whatsoever. That would just be great. And again, like, I understand it's part of the time period. Doesn't mean I have to like it. I'm just hoping the next two books are just not as forcefully opinionated. Yeah, I don't understand at all the part where Sherlock dresses as an old man and bamboozles Watson and the detective. Like, I don't understand the point of that. I really didn't. And it just made me think of A Study in Scarlet when the guy dressed as the old woman. Did Sir Arthur Conan Doyle have a fascination with dressing up as the opposite gender? I don't know. I really don't have anything more to add to the revelation of the mystery because I really didn't care for it. But one of the last things I do want to mention is how this shows the duality of Holmes and Watson and their personalities. So with the poison dart, it seemed like one of them had been blown their way during a confrontation. And Watson looks just behind where they had been standing, struck one of those murderous darts, which we knew so well. It must have whizzed between us at the instant we fired. Holmes smiled at it and shrugged his shoulders in his easy fashion, but I confess that it turned me sick to think of the horrible death which had passed so close to us that night. With Sherlock just like shrugging his, his shoulders, I think Sherlock Holmes knows in that moment that it didn't hit them, they didn't die, so it doesn't matter. So he just shrugs his shoulders, just like, okay, that doesn't affect me. So again, you have like Sherlock being a little bit more methodical, and he's not like wasting emotions on something because it didn't do anything, it doesn't matter. But yeah, I do love the dichotomy between them. So yeah, the last thing I'll mention is Mary and Watson. And when Watson goes to give Mary the treasure, it turns out the box is empty. And Mary didn't really seem to care much about the treasure anyway. And Watson is so happy. So when he says that there is no treasure and Mary won't be a rich lady, he says, thank God. And she says, why do you say that? Because you are within my reach again, because I love you, Mary, as truly as ever a man loved a woman. And then she says, then I say thank God too. Whoever had lost a treasure, I knew that night I had gained one. That's a sweet line. That is very sweet, very romantic. But again, I just like, they've only just met. They don't really know one another very well, like at all, really. So it makes me laugh at the very end when Sherlock is like, I really cannot congratulate you. Love is an emotional thing, and whatever is emotional is opposed to that true cold reason which I place above all things. I should never marry myself, lest I bias my judgment. And then at the very end of the book, he reaches for his cocaine bottle. Okay, like, incredible. Sherlock is still like an incredible personality, an incredibly fascinating character to read about, and to see the workings of his brain and to try and understand it a little bit. But yeah, I didn't really like this one. I really didn't. I don't feel like I have too much to say about it. And I didn't really get captivated by the mystery. I didn't really like the mystery. But I am starting to see the hallmarks of what makes a Sherlock Holmes story. And yeah, hopefully moving forward, I can sort of, come to appreciate some of those hallmarks while also being able to still criticize when those hallmarks don't work for me. I do have much higher hopes for The Hound of the Baskervilles, though. If that one does not blow me away, considering how infamous it is, I might be a little bit worried about like my future ratings for Sherlock Holmes stories. I am unfortunately going to sound like such a cliche because obviously The Hound of the Baskervilles is one of, if not the most famous Sherlock Holmes story. And thus it's the most popular, the most well received. And I did really enjoy this one. It is my favourite Sherlock Holmes story so far. And yeah, I'm scared of sounding like a cliche because of that, but this had so many things that I love about classics. Like if it were learning anything about me in regards to classics, I love Gothic classics, and I did a dissertation on a couple of Gothic classics back at university. I freaking love them. And The Hound of the Baskervilles has so many hallmarks of a fantastic Gothic novel. I will be giving this one 4 stars, or maybe 4.5. I'm not 100% sure. It's not one of my like 5-star Gothic novels, but it has the atmosphere, it has the description, it has a really captivating plot that comes across as a little bit supernatural, and you're wondering, oh, how in the world is this going to be explained? And it's just brilliant. It's so good. But there are also some elements of it that kind of holds it back a little bit, which I'll get into. But yeah, I firstly love the character development of Sherlock and Watson, and I do feel like because of the short stories in between, I'm obviously like missing a whole lot. But I think that, you know, now that I'm reading like the 3rd novel and there would have been so many short stories before this, I still feel like I'm following along very well with the characterizations of them both and the development that they've both undertaken. So in terms of like Watson, at the start of this book, Sherlock is trying to get him to make his own observations about this like walking cane that a previous visitor had left, Mortimer. And I love that Sherlock is actually like trying to encourage him, even though Sherlock will be very honest about, you know, Watson being wrong about anything. But he's still very encouraging. He's saying like, oh, you know, Watson's theories are perfectly sound. And then he's asking questions that Watson then answers. And then, yeah, obviously Sherlock turns around and is like, I'm afraid, yeah, Watson, that most of your conclusions were erroneous. When I said that you simulated me, I meant to be frank that in nothing your fallacies, I was occasionally guided towards the truth. Not that you are entirely wrong in this instance, blah, blah, blah. Like, he's being honest. Like, I don't think you will ever learn, you know, like you can have teachers blowing smoke up your ass, you know, because they don't want to hurt your feelings. Sherlock does not care about hurting your feelings. That kind of thing is not really relevant to him. He just wants, you know, the scientific truth, the absolute hard truth. And if Watson is making mistakes, then he's going to tell him he's making mistakes. So I do love that, though, because he's still, you know, trying to help him. Even later on, when Watson is asking a question, Sherlock is, again, encouraging him, being like, do none suggest themselves? You know my methods, apply them. So he's like, hey, you've observed me for as long as you have, and you've seen me on these cases, you've seen me observe, apply what you know, what I do, to your own work. And I love that. It really does show the progression of them both. Even just like from the first chapter, I was like, okay, like this is already so much better than the previous one. But the case itself, with the whole Baskervilles and everything, we have Mortimer coming and he's got a manuscript and he's talking about the legend of the Hound and what plagues this family. And, you know, years ago we had Hugo Baskerville. He tries to force this farmer girl to marry him. She ends up running away. She dies of fear. And then Hugo himself, oh, this is terrifying when this happens as well. And this is only chapter 2. And already the horror, like there are horror elements to this story. It was that standing over Hugo and plucking at his throat, there stood a foul thing, a great black beast shaped like a hound, yet larger than any hound that ever mortal eye has rested upon. And even as they looked, the thing tore the throat out of Hugo Baskerville, on which, as it turned its blazing eyes and driven jaws upon them, the three shrieked with fear and roared for their life, still screaming across the moor. So like hearing this urban legend, almost this folktale, and it's horrific, you know, the idea that this beast that is bigger than any hound, but what else could it have been, has ripped out the throat of someone, and it's so gnarly, it's so gruesome. And this is the kind of story that Sherlock is like, oh, this is like very fanciful. However, you know, there are recent events, a recent death, that kind of leads to, oh, is this the Hound of the Baskervilles? Is this the Hound that's come back to murder the heirs of Hugo? And even just the setting of the moors, I freaking love that, because the moors can be a very beautiful place, but also a very unforgiving place. So I went to Jamaica Inn last year, and there was a book by Daphne du Maurier where it goes into like a lot of like the moors and the description of the place. It's a very atmospheric place indeed. And to hear about moors in this too, it's just so captivating. And when they get to Baskerville Hall, so like Sherlock doesn't even accompany Watson to Baskerville Hall to begin with. And at first I was like, wait, is Sherlock not part of the story? Are we not getting Sherlock? Turns out that he was there, but like in secret. So I kind of love that. But I was so sad that I thought that, oh, we weren't going to get Sherlock much in this, because when the first chapter was about Sherlock kind of imparting some wisdom to Watson, trying to get him to learn his methods, I thought, oh, maybe this is just going to follow Watson and Sherlock's not going to be part of it, is a test for Watson to solve something on his own. But no, unfortunately, that's not the case. But yeah, I love the description of Baskerville Hall, how there is a window or a coat of arms broke through the dark veil. Seminole Block rose the twin towers, ancient, crenellated, and pierced with many loopholes. There were turrets that were modern wings of black granite. Dull light shone through heavy mullioned windows and from the high chimneys. Oh, like this is the kind of description I love. I eat it up. They go inside. In the dining hall is like shadow and gloom, a long chamber, and things like, oh my god, it sounds so freaking good. I want to go to Baskerville Hall. I want to live there. I want to experience that, and it's just so good. It's like brilliant. I'm going to end up like changing my rating probably. It's probably going to end up being a 4.5 because yeah, like it's just picturing such an amazing picture in my head, and definitely so much better than the first two novels, like by leaps and bounds in my opinion, because we have a pretty clear-cut mystery and like not really any questionable cultural stuff as well. It's actually a lot better and I guess easier to follow as well. So that's why I was like eating this up. And it feels almost like a ghost story, almost like Haunted of Hill House-esque. Although like a lot of things do get debunked. There was wailing in the night, like sobbing in the night. They thought it was a woman. And Watson is like, did you, for example, happen to hear someone, a woman, I think, sobbing in the night? That's curious where I did when I was half asleep. Fancy that I heard something of the sort. Conclude that was all a dream. I heard it distinctly and I'm sure that was really the sob of a woman. The butler turned a shade paler still. It sounds like it would be a bit of a ghost story. It does turn out to be the butler's, aka Barrymore's wife. And when I tell you, I was definitely suspicious of the Barrymores. I was very suspicious of them. I had no idea that there would be a connection to the escaped convict on the moors, which again is like such a like urban legend kind of story, isn't it? That in itself has the hallmarks of horror. But yeah, the only thing that I think was spoiled for me in that modern thriller mystery novel, the Benjamin Stevenson novel, so there's one called Everyone in This Bank is a Thief, there was something mentioned in that kind of spoils the Hound of the Baskervilles a little bit. But it wasn't that part of the story that spoiled it. It was the fact that there was like paint on the Hound to make it seem like luminous kind of thing, like that was mentioned. So obviously like I'm jumping ahead a little bit then, but I'm saying like there are twists and turns of this novel that I didn't see coming. Like Sherlock Holmes, for example, as well, because I thought he was allowing Watson to solve this mystery on his own. We actually do have Sherlock actually hiding nearby so that he was like not directly involved, so that nobody knew he was there. But yeah, it turns out that he is there because Watson sees this mysterious figure, this mysterious man. And yeah, I wasn't sure exactly who that could be. In the mystery, it was just layered. It was layered. I mean, I'm sure it was like probably obvious to a lot of people that it would be Sherlock. But yeah, I don't know, like there were things set up at the start that I think we were going to go towards, maybe like a little red herring kind of thing, which, you know, is very prominent in mystery novels, very prominent in Agatha Christie novels as well. So these kinds of things do like kind of sway me a little bit and like get me off the scent, no pun intended. And yeah, it was just like, it's just so brilliant. It's so good. The sobbing of the woman turns out to be the wife, like Barrymore's wife. She was crying, and Watson, through his powers of observation that he's learning from Sherlock, he is able to see that she has been the one who has been crying. And they catch them with the candle in the window, and they were like giving a signal. Oh, honestly, I had like full body chills during that because I was like, why are they doing that? Are they signaling someone to come and murder everyone? You know, I just wasn't sure. And then yeah, it turns out that they are, you know, signaling to the convict because Mrs. Barrymore is related to him, the convict, and they're trying to like help him, you know, before he gets passage out of the country. So all of that was just like coming together, and I was like, oh my god, like that's actually like really good. And I wasn't expecting that part of it too. I knew something was shifty with them, but I didn't know that is what it would be. But I definitely found Stapleton to be very shifty as well to begin with. Stapleton turns out to be the person who is like releasing a hound, release the hounds. Is that what The Simpsons, Mr. Burns, is that after Hound of the Baskervilles, release the hounds? I do think maybe they did parody the Hound of the Baskervilles and The Simpsons. Did they do that in like a Treehouse of Horror episode? I can't really remember. Anyway, sorry, that was a bit of a tangent. Yeah, Stapleton was very shifty. He is the one who is the man behind the curtain, the culprit. He has the hound. He is a descendant of the Baskervilles, and he is trying to get rid of the other heirs so that he can claim the fortune. And a really good foil to Sherlock as well, like a really good four. What I loved before they even get to Baskerville Hall, is that we have Sir Henry coming to claim the fortune. He's been told about it. So Henry arrives in London and weird things are happening, like his boots are going missing and they actually see someone like follow him. So like Sherlock tries to follow him and that person gets into a cab. And when they get that cab driver, and the cab driver says, oh, he told me his name. And they're like, oh my God, what was his name? And the cab driver says, oh, Sherlock Holmes. And Sherlock is like, that sneaky little devil. Isn't that brilliant? Because Sherlock Holmes, he has a brilliant mind. And I feel like trying to put anyone up against Sherlock Holmes is asking for trouble. But to actually have someone who is using their brain and is like, you know, saying his name is Sherlock Holmes, it's just like, it was so good. And I also felt like laughing when Sherlock laughed at that. It was just so funny. And I don't know there is like a bigger kind of foe against Sherlock Holmes. I think it's like a very famous rivalry. And I think that must happen in the short stories of Sherlock Holmes maybe, rather than like the actual novels. But I kind of vaguely know of someone called Moriarty. And yeah, I feel like Stapleton in this is, I mean, I haven't read anything with Moriarty just yet, but this is like the first time in the 3 novels I've read so far where it feels like Sherlock's had an actual challenge. And yeah, this is, oh, I loved it. So one of the reasons why I don't think this is like a full-on 5-star for me, why I'm thinking like more 4 than a 4.5 is there are a couple of chapters where there's like a report that Watson is sending to Sherlock. And I don't really love like that narrative style when it goes into the epistolary format. Because we're already getting things from Watson's point of view anyway. So some of it felt a little bit repetitive, but we did also get like some new insights into like these couple of chapters. But I was still like, I don't really need all of this. And it kind of slowed the pacing down quite a bit. But that is how we find out about the Barrymores and like the convict and stuff. But I feel like it would have been more effective getting all of that Barrymore and convict stuff in a first-hand account, like as Watson is experiencing it, rather than Watson looking back on that event and writing it down for Sherlock. You know, I feel like it probably would have been more effective in a different way. But hey, I ain't about to tell Sir Arthur Conan Doyle how he should have wrote this, because he is the master here, not me. But from a personal preference, I would have preferred to have seen that play out. But I do love it when Watson is trying to investigate himself. There is the LL, like the initials LL, in a letter that one of the victims received, Charles Baskerville. Charles Baskerville's death is what kind of kick-started this all off. And they do find a burnt up letter and it has the initials LL. The only person they could think of was Laura Lyon. So I liked Watson having his own initiative and going out there and investigating all of that, trying to find out who that mysterious man is on the tour, and finding out that it's Sherlock. That was very exciting, especially since there are like these abandoned huts on the moor, and Watson goes into one with a gun, and it's like, Watson, you're putting yourself in such immediate danger here. Like, this could be anyone, but he does it anyway, and I have to respect that, I do. So thank God it turns out to be Sherlock. It is a lovely evening, my dear Watson. I really think that you'll be more comfortable outside than in. I need to watch an adaptation of this now, because I can really see the fog, and I can see the Gothic building, and I can see the atmosphere like really play out in my head. You hear the moans and you hear the screams in the background in the distance. And it was really cool when they thought that Sir Henry Baskerville was dead, because he had some of his clothes on. But it turns out it was a convict who was dead, because he was given that so that he could escape. But then, you know, they hear him scream, they find his body, it was face downwards, head doubled under him in a horrible angle. That moan had been the passing of his soul. Oh my gosh, the way that is described, the way this is written is gorgeous. But yeah, they think it's Henry, but it actually turns out not to be. And that's when the whole boots going missing at the start is, because I was wondering how Arthur Conan Doyle would pair the two together. Like the boots going missing at the start in a totally different place in London to now. And yeah, it turns out like the Hound needs the scent of the air so that he can go after him and kill him. And because the convict was wearing his clothes, well, the Hound was obviously confused and went for him instead. So like that was just, oh, so brilliant. But still so terrifying too, because when you think about a hound being on the loose, it is scary. And that's when Sherlock sets the trap. They ask Henry to go across the moor, just like to walk across it. And he also gets Lestrade, the detective, to come. It's almost like, you know, how Agatha Christie has the parlor scene when all of the revelations happen and you learn all about what went into the mystery. All the clues get explained. This is like a lot more exciting of a kind of plot progression. And I do apologize for like comparing Agatha Christie to this. Agatha Christie is like the only kind of other mystery writer that I've read from this time period, although Agatha Christie came after Sherlock Holmes. But you know what I mean, like the older mysteries. I guess, would you say like the golden age? Is this, I would like to research the time period and stuff, but I'm sure it's like around about this time. So I'm making comparisons. I do apologize. Oh, but yeah. Okay, so page 158 to 159 of my Penguin English Library edition is when they have the confrontation with the Hound, and it is terrifying. There is all this fog, so they can't really see. The Hound like jumps, right into frame. I'm picturing this in my head because I picture everything as I'm reading. I play like a movie in my head as I read. And the Hound just like bursts into frame. They yell, "A hound it was, an enormous coal-black hound, but not such a hound as mortal eyes have ever seen." They say, fire bursts from its open mouth, its eyes glow with a smoldering glare, muzzle and hackles and dewlip, while lined in flickering flame. Like, it's so dramatic. It's so cinematic as well. And this was written in the early 1900s, I believe, late 1890s, early 1900s. And yeah, it's just like, it's so cinematic. It's so exciting. There was a cry of pain. If he was vulnerable, he was mortal. And if we could wound him, we could kill him. So there's like a scream after scream from Sir Henry, deep roar of the Hound. It's so chaotic. It's so chaotic, but it's so brilliantly pictured. So good. Oh my god, I want to end up giving this a 5-star, I think. And especially after the disappointment of the Sign of 4, I feel like this is just what I needed to restore my faith in what makes Sherlock Holmes great. But yeah, it obviously turns out that obviously the Hound is real. It's not a ghost story. And it was all purposefully mastered by Stapleton. And Stapleton ends up getting away. He actually doesn't really come to any kind of justice at the end of this, although I think it is assumed that even though he gets away, he most likely died. But we don't say about it, we don't say nothing. So I'm not really, like, he hasn't been arrested, nothing like that. So I'm just like, well, I think that he escaped. He escaped well. And then there is like a massive chapter at the end where Sherlock just explains a lot of stuff, which isn't the most riveting, especially after the previous chapter when we have that confrontation with the Hound. So that's why, again, I'm like, maybe 4.5. But still so good. Yeah, this is Sherlock explaining how Stapleton kind of escaped their clutches, how he came to London, figure out about Henry and how he killed Charles and stuff like that. You know, it is good to get the explanations. But also sometimes I don't need the entire story. And I think that's also what they end up saying too. You don't need absolutely everything to understand what happened. And Watson's asking questions and Sherlock's like, it's a formidable difficulty and I fear that you ask too much when you expect me to solve it. And yeah, and not absolutely everything can be fully answered, but that just leaves some of it to our imagination, and that's the way it should be. I love that. So yeah, this is definitely the best one so far by leaps and bounds, and I'm just that much more excited to read the last novel. But yeah, I don't know how we're going to top this, and with this being the most infamous Sherlock Holmes story, I do think this is popular and hailed as the best one for a reason, and I'm glad to see what that reason is. So great, so good. Yeah, nothing more to say. It took my breath away. Oh, you guys are going to hate me. I don't think I really enjoyed the last Sherlock Holmes story, but I feel like maybe it is because I haven't really done the short stories in between, and I feel like maybe I would take so much more from the short stories as well. So I am bearing that in mind. I totally understand that I really should have done the short stories as well, and I will do, I promise. Like, even though I wasn't the biggest fan of this book, I do really like the idea of Sherlock Holmes, and I like what he does, as well as some of the writing too. Like, I really don't mind a good classic sometimes. And yeah, I feel like I would enjoy the short stories. So I had just mentioned, oh, I wonder why Moriarty is going to get mentioned. And we ended up getting a mention in here, in fact, a few mentions, and even some kind of entanglement with the main mystery of this. And the first chapter of this started out so well because Sherlock and Watson do receive some kind of clue, like a message that they need to decode. And this clue, this message they need to decode is from Moriarty. So we get those first initial mentions and I was like, oh my god, yes. And I really do want to understand and see unfold the relationship between Moriarty and Sherlock, because Watson says he is a scientific criminal, is famous among crooks, and then Sherlock actually defends Moriarty Sherlock says, in calling Moriarty a criminal, you are uttering libel in the eyes of the law, and there lies the glory and the wonder of it. The greatest schemer of all time, the organizer of every devilry, the controlling brain of the underworld, a brain which may have made or marred the destiny of nations. That's the man. The way that Sherlock is bigging Moriarty up and giving him this like incredible reputation, and I haven't even met the man yet. I don't know. I don't think we've met him before in any of the short stories, because even Watson is a little bit like, oh, that guy kind of thing. So I don't think we have actually had a face-to-face encounter or anything like that. And especially since an inspector asked, I thought you told me once, Mr. Holmes, that you had never met Professor Moriarty. And Sherlock says, no, I never have. Inspector asks, then how did you know about his rooms? And Sherlock says, I have been 3 times in his rooms, twice waiting for him under different pretexts, and leaving before he came. So yeah, I do think maybe this is potentially the first time we've heard of Moriarty, or at least like the way that it's kind of built up Moriarty as a person, especially since we are coming from Watson's point of view predominantly, and there doesn't seem to have been that much of an interaction beforehand. So anyway, yeah, love the first chapter because we do have that message that they have to decode, and they're like, how are we going to decode this? Like these random ass numbers. And they work it out that they need to decode through an almanac. And an almanac is something that everyone pretty much has. And at first it doesn't seem to work. And then it turns out that Sherlock and Watson have an updated almanac. And there are some people who don't have that yet. So they use the older almanac and they discovered the message and what that said. And it was about the fact that someone called Mr. Douglas of Birlstone Manor is in danger. However, at the end of the first chapter, we get a message that Mr. Douglas is dead. So it's like they're already late. We started off the story and they're already late to trying to, I guess, save the person who was in that message from Moriarty. So I was like, okay, like this is going to be a great final book of Sherlock Holmes. Although I do think there is another short story collection after this. So I think we might get more of Moriarty in that, which I would honestly love. But yeah, we set off the story so freaking well. And we also do have that idea of going to a totally different place. Like in the previous book in Baskerville Hall, we have them going to Birlstone Manor. Again, the descriptions of it. The village of Birlstone is a small and very ancient cluster of half-timbered cottages on the northern border of the county of Sussex. And so I feel like I'm going on an adventure, and I love the image that it's painting in my head of this place. I do love it when like Watson, Sherlock go on an adventure and they describe the setting to me. I mean, don't get me wrong, I would love more scenes at Baker Street considering how infamous Baker Street is. But no, I do love it when they go on a little bit of a road trip. It's awesome. We get introduced to Cecil Barker and we find out that the body, his face was essentially blown off by a shotgun at close range. And I think it's like really brilliant, the twist of this one, because we think that Mr. Douglas is the one who's dead. And, you know, he has this weird like kind of branding or tattoo on him which relates to the Valley of Fear, and so it doesn't really seem like anything's amiss. And even I, reading this, I didn't think anything was really amiss with the victim. You know, his face has been blasted off, but he's wearing his clothes. There is a weird thing with his wedding ring. His wedding ring wasn't on his finger, and that was the only thing that was missing from his finger. His other rings were there. So it's like, okay, like that's a bit strange. And I couldn't connect the dots. So I love the fact that this book surprised me with the mystery, because I didn't get what ends up unfolding. It's brutal. And there is a moat around this place as well, which sounds so freaking cool. And they are like, well, how did someone get away? You know, when the drawbridge is up, it has to have happened during a certain time. They had to have escaped a certain way, or that person would have been like sopping wet and, you know, stuff like that. So there was definitely a lot of interesting things happening with the mystery. And I was following along and I was like, okay, like I'm not understanding exactly what could have happened. There's like a missing dumbbell. And yeah, it is Sherlock again, who he has a plan. And he ends up like trapping someone again, and that's when things start to unravel. I was very suspicious of Cecil Barker because of the question Sherlock asked about like, oh, did Mr. Douglas entirely approve of your friendship with his wife? And Barker was like, how dare you ask such a question? So it seems like there is something a little bit more going on. So I was a little bit suspicious. And when he like pulls the stuff from the moat, you know, after Sherlock Holmes had laid a trap, that's when I was like, okay, well, maybe it was Cecil Barker who had done it because he was inside. And, you know, he could have gotten away with it. Okay, so there's like a massive, like, gagged, gooped, absolutely bamboozled moment in this when, you know, we have like the parlor scene when everything's getting kind of explained before the massive flashback. This is split into 2 parts, like A Study in Scarlet. And when we have, like, after the confrontation with Cecil Barker and like the whole moat thing, and Cecil and Douglas's wife are like explaining some things, But Sherlock is like, at the same time, there is much that is unexplained, and I should strongly recommend that you ask Mr. Douglas to tell us his own story. And I was like, wait, hang on. Mr. Douglas? Like, isn't he the one who's supposed to be dead? And then a man seemed to emerge from the wall, and it is Mr. Douglas. Yep. That was so incredible, and I freaking loved that reveal. He kind of explains that he was hunted down and someone tried to kill him. Well, he had a bit of a scuffle with a shotgun, ended up killing that person, but his face was blasted off, so he could have passed for Mr. Douglas, and he decided to like fake his death kind of thing so that he would not be followed again. And all of this is explained by page 86. And there's still like another nearly 100 pages of this. And then we have part 2, The Scourers. Oh my god, I was fucking bored. I was so fucking bored of part 2. Part 1 was great. If this had just been that short story, it was just part 1 in general, oh my gosh, this would have been a 4-star. It would have been a 4-star because I was like, oh my god, that was brilliant. Like I loved the reveal, didn't expect it. And then part 2 happened. Oh my god, I was falling asleep. Just like A Study in Scarlet. However, with A Study in Scarlet, I was very enamored, I guess, by the characters by the end. Like there was 5 chapters, and it was like the characters and the killer at the start is explaining his story, and it recontextualized how I thought the case was and like how it came to be and all this, that, and the other, and who I thought was in the wrong and injustice. It made me recontextualize the case, and that was like really effective. And so like now I can appreciate it more looking back on it. However, this one, I don't think it does anything other than just provide so much, like, there is a great deal of context, absolutely, and it does make you understand more of what happened and at the Valley of Fear and the people who were chasing him and stuff like that. I didn't care though. I genuinely didn't care. I don't think it changed my mind about the murder or like the self-defense or anything from the first part. It just didn't interest me whatsoever, and it was nearly 100 pages. In fact, I think it was longer than the first part, or nearabouts. It probably ran about the same amount of time, to be honest. But oh my gosh, I was so freaking bored. It was like 20 years before. It explains like Douglas, his real name, like what he went through in America. Didn't care. Genuinely did not care. I don't care about the gang called the Scourers. I didn't care about the fact that Douglas was like working undercover and exposing these people and stuff. I did not care at all. And it just went on and on and on and on, like it's still going on and on. Oh my gosh. Yeah, then we get to the epilogue, which is only 1, 2, 3 pages. The tiny 3-page epilogue at the end explains that Douglas was going abroad and he went overboard in a ship, and Sherlock thinks that it was actually Moriarty who had a hand in that, which is so interesting. Like that is such, again, like an interesting idea. Would have loved to have explored that a little bit more, but no. We got like the briefest breadcrumbs of who Moriarty is, the puppeteer, the master of the strings and what have you, and we do not elaborate on him at all, which again, like that is most likely an intentional choice by Doyle, and we will probably explore that in the following short stories. But like as a story itself, like this is the last Sherlock Holmes book, I felt a little bit empty. I felt like it was like maybe a little bit unfinished, and it just felt like there was just so much more to give, and I didn't feel it in this story at all by that second part. Genuinely did not like the second part at all. When there is a massive chunk of story, nearly 100 pages, probably more like 80 pages, I'm probably over-exaggerating, so around about 80 pages, without Sherlock Holmes, without Watson, it's so freaking boring. I know there was like a big chunk of The Hound of the Baskervilles without Sherlock as well, but like it was so intentional, and the atmosphere of The Hound of the Baskervilles just kept me engrossed anyway. The plot was fast moving. We were figuring out more of the mystery, but the fact that the mystery is pretty much solved halfway through, and only then do we get nearly 100 pages of context and backstory, and I don't care. I don't care by that point. The mystery's solved. The mystery's solved. So you know what I mean? So it's like, it just felt so empty and so... I just didn't like the end of this. I didn't like that second part of this at all. I barely made any notes because I was just like reading. I was just like, am I really wasting my time with this? Do I really, 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 really need to know the nitty-gritty of Douglas's past and what he was doing? Do I really need to know that? Is it that important? We get this many. I wouldn't mind it if a chapter or two. A chapter or two. Oh my gosh, I I didn't like it. I really didn't like it. Having said that, it's definitely still better than the second book in the series. I would probably give this one a 2.5. It could have been so close to being a 3.5 or a 4, but it just plummeted in that second part. And I ended up not really liking this all that much. First part, great. Would have been like a 4-star on its own. Second part, like 1.5 to 2-star. And I kind of wish I saw more of Watson's and Sherlock's character development in this one too. I feel like maybe their development's already peaked by this point, and there wasn't really too much more to explore in their relationship going into the Valley of Fear. I feel like we'd already seen everything we needed to in terms of who they are as people, and so this kind of, it felt like it wasn't that important. I imagine it is in the grand scheme of things with Moriarty being mentioned, but it was really just a few fleeting mentions and not really too much more than that. Overall, standing on its own, the Valley of Fear is a bit of a disappointing way to end the Sherlock Holmes adventure that I'm on right now. Having said that though, I am so happy that I tried Sherlock Holmes for the very first time, and I can literally say that I have read Sherlock Holmes now. It just seems like a bucket list kind of thing to tick off a literature checklist. Genuinely fascinated by the character. I really am looking forward to reading some short stories and seeing what really thrives with Sherlock and if I prefer that kind of format over the longer novels. But saying that though, I do think The Hound of the Baskervilles was brilliant. I do. Like, I'm thinking about it. I've been sitting on it for a few days now, and my rating for this one just keeps on going up and up, and my opinion on this one keeps improving the more time that I spend away from it and the more Sherlock Holmes stories that I read, because in comparison, the Baskervilles story is genuinely the most riveting, the most atmospheric, the most mysterious, and just the best one so far anyway. So I'm really glad that I did this so that I could read that. But yeah, overall, had a fun time. It was a pretty good ride. So that is the end of my beginning Sherlock Holmes adventure. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please leave a like if you did and subscribe if you haven't already. Leave all the comments down below. Let me know what you thought of the video. Let me know if you have a favorite Sherlock Holmes story. And it could be the short stories as well. Maybe there is a Sherlock Holmes short story that is the absolute best and I must read it. Please let me know down below. I would love to chat to you. Please use any channel high points as well on your mobile app if you have any left to give. I would really appreciate it. I want to give a huge thank you to my channel members for supporting my channel. If you'd like to join my channel membership, then the link is in the description box. But yeah, I hope I will see you in the next video. Bye.